Well, we're back. Episode 2. Brad Foster here, Felicity Zadro over there. We are talking all things media, public relations, the relationship between journalists and PR people. This episode, 2 things we're going to talk about. Frequency. How often should you be sending the media stories or articles? And the all-important press release, writing a press release. So, Felicity, how are you?
Very well, Brad.
Welcome back to the beautiful AV1 control room here at the MCA. I did mention they have 4 venues around Australia. This is just one of them, and the guys are certainly helpful and are helping people get back into the realm of events, online and hybrid and a little bit live. So we're live here. Felicity, a bit on frequency. How often? How much is too much? How often should you be sending things out to the media? How often should you be doing communications, I guess, to your audience?
Yes, it's such a good question, and something that we talk about all the time with clients. I think in terms of press releases, I've had clients who want to send one out every week or every 2 weeks. And I think unless you are doing something really amazing and really different every week, I think it's too often. And so often I will say to people, back away from the press release. Like we'll pull it back and make sure that we've got really good stories and we've got the time to prepare those stories and interview people and talk to the rest of the team and get those angles out. So I think always go for quality over the quantity. Saying that though, we have to be realistic about the timings and the scheduling of those activities. And so when we're writing our PR strategies, we really do think about, okay, how often do we want to go to press? And that really depends on the stories coming up. But I would say, once every month or once every 2 months would be appropriate.
I guess it depends on the circumstances and the subject. I'm a believer in too regular is too much. I take the Kardashians as an example. You want to read about them every day, and people do, but do you really want to read about them every day? Prince Harry and Meghan, when the royals, it was very every day probably.
It was too much.
Now. And you sort of switch off, but now when there's a little story about them, your ears prick up and you go, oh, what are they up to? Are they in Canada or America or whatever? And I think it's the same in our world. At the start of COVID, we were doing a newsletter once a week, and we made the decision to make that daily, just to give our audience updated information and information that wasn't in the mainstream media, stories that were relevant to the business events community. And it was incredible, the uptake and the open rate jumped through the roof. Now, we may be looking at paring that back a little bit as things settle down. But I guess it's just one of those things that you have to have that conversation with your clients, because the media can get a little bit cranky if things are coming too regularly.
Oh, absolutely. And it's also around the quality of the stories and the relevance. So the reason why, you doing a daily EDM out and covering the news of the day during, especially the early stages of COVID, is going to have a huge audience, is because it's hugely relevant. People were desperate to find out what was going on and what their colleagues and competitors and industry was doing. So unless you've got really, you've really got to come down to audience, relevance, and the quality of the news. And so we talked in our last video about moving messages from public relations over to marketing. And so, it really depends also on the other channels that you're using and how often you're posting on social or going out with a newsletter or updating your blog or etc. So, that's really important. But I just want to make a quick point about the frequency of public relations with marketing. Sometimes we have a situation where our client will go, or they want to put the news of the day out in marketing before public relations. And that's obviously a big no-no, because why would you as MiceNet want to cover a story that me as a client has already published in our own channels? So when we were developing those PR and comms and integrated communication strategies, we really need to look at frequency, but also in sync with whatever else is going on with their channels.
Yep. And the other thing is that you say you're doing a weekly or a fortnightly or a monthly. You have to do it, don't you? You don't say, oh, okay, we're not the, what's the Woman's Weekly now? Is that monthly or I can't remember? But you've got to do it. And you mentioned prior to us filming that it's a reflection on the whole company.
Yes.
And if your marketing communications or your comms isn't on time, then what do you say?
Exactly. It really is an indication of your credibility. So even though, for example, like an AV company, it's got nothing to do with communications and marketing at all, but if you go out and say that you're going to do, or this e-newsletter is a monthly e-newsletter, and then I go to your website and I can't find any link to it every month, or as one of your people, your clients, it comes out at all kind of weird times, it does really reflect on the credibility of the company. And I've had people say, you know, and you know yourself, well, if you can't put out a monthly newsletter, even though you said you would, how am I going to trust you with my event, my business, my service, my technology? So even though it actually makes no rational sense, you know, communication, not only what you say, but how you say it, really reflects your credibility. So yeah, you know, if you go to a mechanic's and it's a complete mess and there's oil and rubbish everywhere, you think, well, how are they going to respect my vehicle when they can't even respect their own workshop? The two are actually not related. But in our own mind, it does make a big impact.
Definitely it does. We had an example of, had some house renovations and a painter, and there was paint spilling out the back of his van. And I was thinking, he came to do a quote, and I was thinking, do I really want him in my house? And his signage on the side, it was sort of a little bit thing. Is he going to do a good job? He was probably a brilliant painter, but as you say, it's all about communication and image and the marketing.
It is.
We'll get on to the press release, because this is something that is an interesting one. It's something that I have a few opinions on, but I'd like to find out first what you say to your clients to include once they've got the story, and it is a story. It's not a marketing message. What should they include in the press release? So
a press release should be newsworthy. I always think about the journalist reading this and someone else who is completely unrelated to the company. Will they be able to understand the who, what, where, why and when straight away? And often when you're working for the company a long time, or you get some information from a client, they're thinking, they're writing in a way that assumes knowledge. So never assume knowledge. And also we always talk about the hook. So what is the hook? What is that one piece of news that you're trying to communicate? I think that's important. That I've received press releases where there are so many new announcements or messages that I'm not sure which takes priority. Right?
And to me, there should be one message, one important message. It should be delivered by one person in terms of quotations or quoting. Two's okay. If it gets any more than that, and I know that there's probably a bit of politics within the organisation who's sending out the press release, that so many different people have to get mentioned, but the reader doesn't care. The reader just wants to know what the news is. And that's something that you guys would probably have to discuss with your client. Educate them.
So we also have different standards internationally. So generally, sometimes in Southeast Asia, the press releases are much longer. And all and sundries is they want to be included.
Yeah.
Even in America, the general format of the press release is quite different, and the same in the UK.
Yeah.
So depending on what market we are working in, we will amend the press release style to suit.
Right.
But I guess, we always run we like our press releases to be no more really than one page, if maybe a little bit more if it's quite good.
Yep.
What's your ideal length, Brad?
I would go for a page.
Yeah.
You have to have at the bottom for further information, for interviews. I shouldn't ask you if you do this, I'm sure you don't. Press releases in PDF.
Oh no, really? Still?
Yes, and I'm telling you, if you do a press release in a PDF, please try to cut and paste the copy into a Word document because it don't work.
No.
It stuffs it up. Journalists, most of them are pretty busy. There is cut and pasting involved, and then hopefully they would get further information or change the headline or the tone or whatever. But yeah, it's send it in a Word document, send it as part of the and then also send it as part of the e-news, the email, and that's all you need. Have a link to photos. Dropbox is something that is here now for photos. We used to receive them via emails. Now we have to. It's a little bit longer process, but I understand why. But going back to it's the who, what, when, where, why. It's the simple 5 points of a story. You have to include that stuff in there.
Absolutely.
You have to have a clear message. You have to have a story, and I really wouldn't care if I didn't have photos. If the story was great, the text, was all one size, one format, I'd be happy with that if the story was there. But please no PDFs. Please no PDFs, and not too many quotes from different people. I know
that is interesting because from my perspective, sometimes we have to, for political reasons or whatever, we have to include, maybe 2 or 3 managers or senior people. But a way that we've gotten around that is by using someone with the best quotes or the most seniority, or, for example, if it was into the events industry and the sales director had more of a profile into the events industry, then we have a reason to choose that person.
Yep.
And then the other people are included in the notes to editors as potentials to be interviewed.
Yeah.
So, but it is, I've been in a situation where I've had a few of those sort of awkward conversations about why we can't have X, Y, and Z in a press release.
Yeah.
But I guess it comes back down to relevancy and who's enhancing the story rather than just putting it in for corporate speak.
Yeah. Okay. Now you would be happy to take emails on writing a press release, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Cool. I think that's it. We've actually gone over time. We didn't think we would. Next segment, we're talking about opportunities in the social media space and building media relationships. So we will see you then. Thanks, Felicity.
Thanks, Brad.
See you soon.